Waking up at your own funeral could be such a huge relief, knowing that you're no longer dead. But on the other hand is the absolute horror of being present at your own funeral. Now, some people have experienced this utterly bizarre mix of emotions, and today we get to look at a few of them. Here are 10 people who woke up at their own funeral. Starting at number 10 is Matthew Hall. Matthew, who was a young farmer in the 16th century, fell into a coma after experiencing an epileptic episode. The year was 1571, and as you would imagine, doctors at the time didn't have a clue what epilepsy was, or even worse, how to handle coma cases. So, given that he wasn't responsive, it was ruled that he was dead. As expected, the family went straight into preparing the body for burial. And then the day of the funeral came, and everyone gathered as Matthew lay still in the well-polished wooden coffin. But as fate would have it, things took a pretty interesting turn when one of the pallbearers lost balance, causing the coffin to drop to the ground. As random as it might have been, it was all that was needed to get Matthew out of his coma. Upon waking and seeing the state he was in, poor Matthew began pounding on the coffin sides as he screamed for help. His family quickly helped to free him, not just from the coffin, but also from being buried alive. Interestingly, Matthew went on to get his happily ever after, as he found the love of his life just a year after the incident. In Matthew's case, his doctors were not learned enough to make the right judgment. But in this next story, these doctors just plainly made a false call. Number 9. Mohamed Furkan. This 20-year-old young man, Mohamed Furkan, after being involved in a terrible car accident, was declared dead after about a month of being unconscious. Throughout the time he spent in the hospital, Mohamed was placed on a ventilator to help keep him alive. However, the burden of paying his medical bills became too heavy for his family to bear. After disclosing this information to Mohamed's doctor, the doctor had no other option but to take Mohamed off the life support machines. A truly devastating moment for the Furkan family. With all hope lost, they began to prepare the burial rites. However, on the day of the burial, all who were in attendance could barely believe their eyes as they saw Mohamed's limbs move. Without wasting any more time, Mohamed was rushed back to the hospital, where he was confirmed to be alive. As you would expect, legal action was immediately taken against the hospital and the doctor who had declared him dead initially. But this wouldn't be the last time we'd hear of a story like this, because our next case sounds almost very similar. Number 8. Walter Williams. 78-year-old Walter Williams' story was one of the greatest shocks his community had to handle. According to Holmes County Coroner, Walter had died on a Thursday at exactly 1 a.m. from natural causes. Walter was widely known as the proud father of 11 kids and great-grandfather of 6. However, it was reported that after a sudden congestive heart failure, Walter had gone into hospice. Just a few days later, all who were directly involved in his treatment at the hospital declared him dead since they couldn't find a pulse. Walter was immediately placed on the embalming table. But while the medical professionals had made their call, Walter had other plans to come back home. Still on the table, Walter began moving, and upon waking up, Walter said he thought he was asleep. You can only imagine what a moment this was for the coroner. But as he said, every case is a chance for him to learn, because we all make mistakes. But this mistaken identity in our next case went a little too far. Number 7. Edison Vicuna. Edison Vicuna had gone missing in Ecuador, South America for 3 whole days. Following a missing persons report that was issued by the family, the police immediately began a search party. It wasn't too long before the corpse of a man with a completely disfigured face was found after a fatal car accident. Following a post-mortem which was carried out on the body, it was somehow concluded that this was Edison's body. With that, burial preparations were made. However, on the day of the funeral, while everyone was still mourning, Edison, who was intoxicated, showed up to crash his own funeral. Everyone present immediately began screaming like they had just seen a ghost. Well, as the case may be, what they saw wasn't a ghost, but Edison, who was very much alive, but had an appointment with so many bottles, he forgot his way home. The actual dead body was then later identified to be someone else. Surprisingly, this wouldn't be the first or last time there would be such a case of misidentification, because this next guy suffered the same fate but under different circumstances. Number 6. Gilberto Araújo. In 2012, the Brazilian man Gilberto Araújo was said to have been identified in the morgue by its brother after there had been a shootout in the car wash where he worked. The body was then carried off to be buried. But then, while the family mourned, the most shocking thing happened. Gilberto, who they thought was about to be laid to rest, pulled a surprise on them by turning up at his own funeral. Apparently, the killer had taken the life of an entirely different employee. This, for sure, was one hell of a moment for everyone in the room. But for the Araújo family, their son and brother was in fact not dead. While some of these cases could have simply been avoided, this next case is absolutely terrifying and couldn't have been blamed on anyone. And on that heartbreaking note, we have to come to the end of this video. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.